By the 700s, the Anglo-Saxons had established well-run, complex and cohesive kingdoms throughout England and parts of southern Scotland. Hegemons had risen and fallen throughout the centuries, and warring had occurred between these many kingdoms, but, for the first time, it appeared like there was now a definitive layout of authority in England, even if patchworked in nature. If history had only gone slightly differently, we might be talking about England today like we talk about the historical Holy Roman Empire, a patchwork of complex, semi-autonomous kingdoms and principalities under the watchful eye of a stronger neighbour. Yet it didn't, for one major reason. The Anglo-Saxons were not left alone. They were constantly attacked and harassed by an external threat, who forced them to unify and start to consider themselves as one single people, the English. This is the story of that threat. This is the story of the Vikings. Firstly, a little note on definitions. You may hear the subject of this video be referred to as Vikings, Danes, or the Norse. While technical differences do exist between the three, some sources are more lax on definitions than the others. Please be aware of this as the video continues. Viking raids began at first to be nothing more than small isolated attacks on monastic communities. This isn't specifically because the Vikings had some deep hatred for monks, but as a consequence of how monasteries in England worked. If there's one word to describe monks and monasteries, it's isolation. Monks required it to avoid the temptations of the outside world and society. To get this, many monasteries were built on islands just off of the mainland. While this on the one hand was a good thing for a monk, it also left them completely isolated from the mainland's military protection. If a mainland town was attacked, a local army could be formed from other nearby towns to march to their protection. The same wasn't true to islands. The Kentish had already experienced these problems, as is shown when their hegemon, King Offa of Mercia, granted a new treaty to establish the privileges and rights of monasteries in Kent in 792. In it, he specifically exempts the monasteries from his own military protection, as if to say, if you want real autonomy, you're gonna have to deal with those pesky sea raiders yourself. Despite this, these attacks were limited, often no more than a few ships stealing treasures and quickly departing before anyone could react. This changed fairly soon, and in only a few decades they'd become far more daring. In 835, a large Viking attack sacked the Isle of Sheppey, also in Kent, destroying multiple settlements and causing large-scale havoc in the community. Soon the Vikings would change their focus, however. Instead of seeing England as merely a target for piracy, these people would realise the same thing that their Anglo-Saxon cousins did. England was a very fertile, fair-climated land, with, in some areas, fairly weak kingdoms. They noticed that the English had never formed a single united England, and therefore, the weaker kingdoms could be easy targets. In 865, the great Heathen army under the command of Ivar the Boneless landed in East Anglia, although the local king offered them tribute in the form of horses so that the Vikings would go elsewhere. Ivar looked north to the weak kingdom of Northumbria, which was currently undergoing a brief civil war. The two claimants to the kingdom, King Alla and King Osbert, settled their differences, uniting to drive out the Vikings. Alla and Osbert, however, failed at this, and both kings died in the attempt. Ivar the Boneless was quickly hailed by the local nobility, who despite not making him king, recognised him as the true authority in the kingdom. In order to placate the locals, Ivar installed an Anglo-Saxon called Egbert to the throne, although he was entirely a puppet of Ivar. The Vikings then briefly warred with neighbouring Mercia, although they failed to take much land, and the Vikings quickly signed a truce with Mercia before returning to the status quo. During this brief peace, the Vikings would betray their truce with East Anglia in 869, swiftly conquering the kingdom. King Edmund of East Anglia was executed after refusing to renounce Christianity and embrace Germanic paganism. for which he is remembered as the martyr. After this, Ivar seemingly disappears from the record. It's possible he adventured in Ireland, where he would die laying claim to the Kingdom of Dublin in 873. In the absence of Ivar, his brother, named Halftan, would take command in 871. The Vikings continued attacking further south. King Æthelflæd of Wessex had already been fighting to stop the expansion of this Viking domain, having previously been allied with Mercia. Now that Mercia had a truce with the Vikings, however, he found himself weakened and without an ally. He would die in battle against the Vikings in 871, being replaced as king of Wessex by his younger brother, Alfred. Alfred realised the dire situation of his kingdom, yet he was not completely beaten either. Seeking to avoid a prolonged and difficult war, Halftan decided to sign a truce with Wessex. Now that Halfdan's southern border was safe from Wessex, he turned his attention back north, as during his conquests in Mercia and Wessex, the Northumbrian nobility had revolted in 873, replacing the puppet king Egbert with a new king called Rixi. Halfdan managed to pacify the nobility of Yorkshire, but he never managed to reconquer the northern half of Northumbria, and Rixi would continue to rule north of the River Tyne. Not seeing the worth in fighting Rixi's small kingdom, Halfdan turned his attention to his other neighbour, breaking his truce with Mercia and conquering them in 874. He installed a friendly nobleman named Ceolwulf as king of a much reduced Mercia, with parts of the east of the kingdom being taken directly by Halfdan. By 876, Halfdan was styling himself as king of Northumbria, signifying his consolidation and expansion of power, and his need to no longer rule through an Anglo-Saxon puppet. Halfdan afterwards split his army, taking a detachment north to deal with raids by the Britons and Picts of Strathclyde, a people who had resisted Anglo-Saxon and now Viking dominance. After pacifying Strathclyde, he decided to attempt to reclaim his brother's kingdom in Ireland. According to the Annals of Ulster, Halfdan deceitfully killed the King of Dublin and stole his throne. The local Danes of Dublin were not too happy with this, seeing Halfdan as an invader and a foreigner, as the Irish Danes had developed a somewhat unique culture by this point. They revolted, and in the process, Halfdan was slain in 877. During Halfdan's pacification of Strathclyde, the rest of his army was led south by another Viking commander by the name of Guthrum. Guthrum was unsatisfied with the Kingdom of Wessex remaining such a strong power, as they were the only kingdom that hadn't been conquered fully or had its king replaced with a Viking puppet. After wintering and building his strength for a few years, he launched a surprise attack on Wessex in January 878. The Wessexians were caught completely off guard, and stood little chance against Guthrum's army. It is possible that a commander of the Wessexian army, Wulfhere of Wiltshire, was bribed into letting the Vikings through to the Wessexian camps unopposed, resulting in a bloodbath, although he could have just been severely incompetent. We don't know too much about how the battle actually happened. All we know is that the Wessexians were completely slaughtered, with only the king and a few of his close retainers managing to flee. It may seem like the Vikings now had command over most of England, with the last three Anglo-Saxon kingdoms about to fall to their might. But there was still a glimmer of hope. Stay tuned for our next video in the series, featuring a king hiding in a marsh, a grand battle, and burnt cakes. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more great historical content, and if you're feeling extra generous, please check out our Patreon linked in the description below.